Hello, everyone. The show that is normally going to be produced and published is coming up in just a moment. I wanted to jump on here in the beginning. Neil's helping me out. I appreciate your professional marketing expertise, Mr. Neil Robinson.
Doing the best I can with it.
So, listen, I have a very special ask for you guys, anyone that listens to the show, to help me out. What's happening is, as you've heard on the show, I've got that book, Through a Therapist's Eyes, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. So we're doing a publication or a promotion this day of Friday, December the 18th. And it's anywhere from noon through the rest of the day. And the way that it works is that if I get enough people that are interested in the project on the same day, then that helps me to become an Amazon best-selling author, which I would be really appreciative of. But I don't want anyone to feel obligated, of course. If you feel interested or compelled in any way, though, my publishers at Morgan James Publishing, those guys are great. They have made a one-day book price of just $1.99. So, Neil, I don't know. You think that's going to break anybody's bank in the middle of the holiday?
Absolutely not. It's a great gift to give too. You can actually give that to people as well. So if you know someone who needs the book, you can gift it if you're not going to read it, or buy one for you and buy one for your friends.
I actually wondered that. So they can get an audio version of, or not audio, it's an electrical version of the book, and you get like a code that you can give as a gift.
Well, you would
Yeah.
basically say, I want to give this to so and so at their email address, and it sends them a thing saying, hey, someone bought you a book.
That's awesome. See, I want the paper, and it won't be available in bookstores until March of this year. I'll be able to sell them. Actually, I could probably sell them through a therapist's eyes here shortly. So you can look out for that too. But I would really honestly appreciate anybody's help for this project. It's been a lot of work, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. It's a compilation of therapy moments through the years that I put in book format, figuring that it would be helpful to the public. So it's just part of what we do here on Through a Therapist's Eyes. We appreciate you joining with us. We're going to have a great new year in 2021, man. I really am getting excited about the new year and things that we're doing. So book promotion December the 18th from noon through the rest of the day on Amazon.com. And check it out with the links and stuff that we have on our platform, man. So here comes our regularly scheduled show on drug trafficking with Mr. Aaron Garcia. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. In a second, actually.
There is a whole area, if you will, of life that many have no idea and do not understand. In our area in the Charlotte metro region, we have what's called Interstate I-85, right? And the things that go on in cars and trucks and what is in those cars and trucks driving down your highway, you would have no idea. I'm talking about pounds and pounds and many pounds of heroin and cocaine and weed, bags and bags of this stuff with just the next door looking kind of car. It is an amazing world that tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are listening to this, you're going to get a little inside scoop about, because we are going to talk about drug trafficking today. So welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes. I am Chris Gazdick, and we usually have Mr. Craig Graves, but instead, Neil Robinson, our producer, is jumping in. How are you this morning, Neil?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
All right, I'm doing all right. I'm feeling a little weird because I got allergies are bothering me again. I'm drinking coffee. I'm on my second and a half cup of coffee. I think I might be shaking before this is over, but that's okay. My voice might crack a little bit, and we're pushing through. But there we go. We got a couple people, because we do have a guest tonight, Aaron Garcia. More on that in a minute. I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist. And Neil, what are you? I don't know how to do my intro, man. How should we introduce you?
I'm an IT guy. I'm a tech guy. That's pretty much what I am.
Got it, man. Let me see. I have a book coming available. Actually, last week I announced that the ebook version of Through a Therapist's Eyes, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. Did I get that right this time too, Neil?
Sounds better.
I know, right? It is actually available now, but we are going to do a little bit of a push. And so I'm not sure when this show is coming out. It might be right on the cusp of it here in a couple of days. December the 18th, I am looking to ask, I have an ask for you to jump on. I think that we might get a discounted rate for the book on a 1-day rate for December the 18th. I need you to go on to Amazon.com, check out the book, get an electronic version of it. I'm having a 1-day push for that to be pushed up in the rankings. A little bit of trick and an effort out there to kind of start this thing right. March the 16th is when the actual paperback release date soon is. But if you've been a long time listener to the show, man, this is a way that you can kind of give back and help out. December the 18th from 12 o'clock noon through the end of the day in the evening. That's when we're kind of doing this little promotional push. So appreciate you thinking about that. And like I said, that's this show's probably coming out a little bit, a couple days. So you only have a couple days to think about it and remember. So Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast. Craig has an Unbeatable Mind Coach website. You can find him at wininyourmind.com. We aim to blow up stereotypes and myths, see the world through the lens of a therapist and a coach, being aware it's not delivery of therapy services in any way. Check out the website throughatherapist'seyes.com, which you, Neil, are making great, better, upgraded, and a lot of new perks and tricks to enjoy there. So also we have a promotional relationship with betterhelp.com. Click the link on our site for counseling, and that gives you a survey that you'll get. You can link up with a counselor. We get a kickback from that helps the show remain free for all. Guys, this is the human emotional experience. So let's figure this thing out together is what we say in a world of addiction, again, drug trafficking, with a personal story from Mr. Aaron Garcia. We titled this One Man's Journey with Drug Trafficking and Addiction. Neil, we need to pay attention to what this guy's doing because he's awesome. You got to check out his website, www.authormgarcia.com. That's AUTHORAMGARCIA.com. This guy's giving his book out absolutely for free. The book is Coincidence or God, a testimony illustrating there is a living God. If you sign up for the email list, you get a free book. Mr. Aaron Garcia, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction here in a moment, but welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes, man. How are you this morning?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. I'm used to saying Craig, so if I say Craig, he's not here this morning. Hope you're doing good today, Craig. He just had some prior arrangements. But Neil, if I call you Craig, I'm sorry. Okay, can we just get that out of the way?
Yep, it's all good.
This guy's got multiple books. The one I just mentioned, also Burn Notice, Recognizing Your Most Inner Fire Purpose, and then Silence the Noise, 15 Days of Inspiration to Help Strengthen Students. So this guy is an evangelist, an international speaker, best-selling author of Coincidence or God, and is the #1 bestseller of his newest book, Burn Notice. Is founder of SOS Ministries Incorporated, nonprofit that's dedicated to improving the community and reaching the lost in the streets. Aaron is known for creating multiple movements such as Broadway Bash, Washington Family Hope Center, and United at the Stadium. Travels all over the globe, specifically unreached countries where the gospel isn't being preached or hasn't been preached, sharing his story and seeing people come to Christ. Aaron and his wife and 3 children all reside in, I don't know what that place is, man. I'm just going to say Missouri. What town is that?
It's called Neosho, Missouri.
Neosho.
Yeah.
All right, man. And where exactly is that in Missouri?
So it is the southeastern corner of Missouri.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All the way West Coast, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
We just had somebody on the West Coast last week. Anytime I get somebody from the West Coast, I always think of slot cannoning. It's a guest of the show told us about this life journey that is now in my bucket list to go slot cannoning. It's absolutely cool. You ever hear of that?
Never heard of that before.
Yeah, the audience is going to be tired of hearing it, so I'm going to probably have to stop talking about it. But take the Grand Canyon, squeeze it into a little 3-5 foot distance, and it goes down for like miles and whatnot, and you like rappel into this thing, dude. I have to do that.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a little bit of an adventurous guy. I like to do some fun things like that. So what did I miss in the introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and again, welcome to the show. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I greatly appreciate you having me on today. You hear a lot of the things in my bio that's, you can tell if it's some guy that's possibly successful and has it all together. But, before I was successful or before people thought I was somebody, I was really a lost boy. And my story really begins at age 16 when I fell into drug addiction. Now, I know a lot of people come from different backgrounds. Some people come from abusive homes or addicted homes or even neglected homes, where a lot of times that lack of love in the household causes people to want to seek after things that are maybe more fulfilling or satisfying to their cravings. And so I grew up in a home that was very structured. I had a good mom and dad who are still married to this day. I had one brother. He was younger than I was. And I was living a life that was really like making A's and B's. I was involved in sports. I went to Joplin High School, which is only 20 miles away from Neosho. And this school was very large. I mean, there's like 2,000 kids went to this school. And so I was very, very involved in academics and sports and things like that. But at age 16, my parents had purchased my first vehicle for me. Now, if you want to understand what kind of vehicle I had a Toyota Tercel. Do you have a clue what that looks like?
A Tercel. I think that's almost like my first car, which was a Ford Escort, one of the kind of clunkers and whatnot.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So think of a modern day Prius. It's like a tightly compact little vehicle.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it was cool because my parents were so loving that they bought my first vehicle for me. So that created in me independence.
Yep.
And that independence went forward and it started to cause me to want to become popular and recognized and all those things that come along with it. So what happened is that when you get your mind or your life into a way of wanting people to seek you or see your face, bad people start to attach themselves to you. And I was becoming popular. I was moving up the ranks in popularity at my school, but there were also drug addicts and drug dealers who were attached to that lifestyle.
Right.
And so I remember my very first encounter that one of my buddies who was a drug addict, he wanted me to come with him to this house. And we pulled up in this street, and you could tell it was a bad place because everyone's lights were off. It was very dark. There were bed sheets over the front of the windows.
Oh, dear.
It's instead of blinds and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I knew walking up to the front door of this place, I knew it was a bad place. In fact, the man that was in the vehicle with me, who was my best friend at the time, told me, whatever I see tonight, I'm not to tell anyone at school or in my house or anything like that.
Always a bad sign, right? Right up the gate.
Yeah, kind of a point where you should probably turn around.
Maybe so.
But you get yourself into these situations where there's really no turning back. You're kind of too far in. And so here we were at the front door, and they opened the door. They were very kind, older people out of high school. So they weren't even in high school. And so they sat me down. We were playing cards. Well, one of the things they started doing is they were passing around this mirror. And on this mirror, had lined out methamphetamines. And what was crazy about it is my friend didn't want me to use. He didn't want me to try the drugs because he knew that if I did, I'd probably be hooked.
Right.
So I kept asking him, can I and should I do this? Well, after a squeaky wheel gets the grease, he finally said, fine, give him a line. And so I snorted a line off this mirror. And man, after that, it was like my mind opened up to a whole world. And I had flights of ideas. I was chattering. I was talking my head off. I was smoking cigarettes. Excuse me. I was smoking cigarettes. And I had no clue that I was falling into a world of addiction at that point in time. Like the moment you try drugs is the moment that it becomes this open window where people are surrounding themselves with consumption.
Right.
And I just wanted to consume and consume and consume. And that really was the beginning point of my life when I started to use drugs.
But you know what's funny, Aaron, as you go through that story and check that out, we've talked about on the show about addiction. It's one of the primary topics that we have. And I find that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what addiction is, what it isn't, that sort of thing. And one of the things that I like to draw out about that is that people see compulsive behavior in much the same light as they do addiction. And one of the things that we know, I heard long ago, that we've kind of found about addiction is that, when you have your first use, when you have your first dose, if you will, dude, it, like you just said, it just boom, it lights up your world in a way that I don't think happens for non-addicted people. And that to me supports the idea of biological addiction being very different than just, compulsive behavior. So does that make sense? Have you ever heard that in your travels and your journeys?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'll go on to say this: people, when they first use, don't want to become an addict.
Right.
Like, no one wakes up going, man, I can't wait to one day become an addicted, drug addict and just, oh, that's the life for me. No one talks about that at first.
Right.
It's experimenting. It's being, like you said, that compulsion happens after you build a tolerance to the drugs or a continuous behavior to where you are now triggered into that habit of addiction.
Yeah, there's a different biological process that goes on. I see with my clients time in and time out. Neil, I wanted to check in with you actually, because part of what I really wanted to hit today, Aaron, and making sure that we're conscious of it, is we actually haven't covered the drug trafficking part of this.
Mhm.
And so I know that we've talked on the phone before that you had some of those experiences, and drug dealing, drug trafficking, that's a whole nother component of what I want to get to tonight. But Neil, I'm kind of curious. Part of what Craig does for the show, audience listening, is that he comes at it from a non-counseling position. Although now he's a coach, he's kind of getting a little bit more, certainly a whole lot more rounded with that. But he's kind of the layman's, non-exposure kind of component of the show, and he hears different things that way. So Neil, I'm curious, what kind of experience do you have? What kind of knowledge do you have? You heard in the opening, how much do you feel like you're tuned into what happens on I-85 with drug trafficking and that sort of thing? It's like a whole hidden world.
Yeah, I've heard a few things, because even going north up 77 towards West Virginia and stuff, I've heard both sides. It's really amazing what they do, and how a lot of the drug traffickers I've heard, they'll use like minivans, like a family minivan.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of cargo space, but it doesn't really stand out. And so I think there's a lot of stuff in the world, especially over here in Gastonia. You don't realize how much stuff actually comes through that. If the normal person knew that, they'd probably never leave their house.
Oh, it's scary. It really is. It's absolutely amazing. And that's part of what I want to blow apart the myth a little bit. When you hear these kind of things, you kind of hear them like, oh, it doesn't happen in my neighborhood. Listen, you very well might have a house in the neighborhood where the basement is full of stuff that you'd never even imagine. Does that sound crazy, Aaron? Or
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at houses, statistics show 1 in every 3 houses was potentially or could have been at one point in time a meth house or a meth lab where people are actually manufacturing drugs and things like that. At least
Wait a minute. 1 in 3 houses could be a meth lab. How is that possible?
Correct. In the Midwest region, we are considered the meth capital of the world. So I'm sorry, let me back up. In the Midwest, where I live, McDonald County, which is not far from here, about 15 minutes away, it's considered one of the largest meth capitals of the United States.
Breaking Bad, man.
Yeah, man. Like redneck. It's
Wow.
Redneck around here. So people are cooking labs. I mean, people are cooking drugs in bathtubs. People are manufacturing labs in different households. And that's what I was kind of talking to you about, is that when I fell into drug addiction, I moved into this house. And little did I know this house was a meth house. But my buddy had invited me over there after high school and asked me to come and hang out. And man, I fell back into my addiction. Well, like I said, little did I know that addiction was now being consumed completely in this household where people were coming in. They were bringing labs with them, flasks, tubes, trash bottles, and things like that. Everything that's involved in a meth lab.
Yeah, wow.
And so we were not only using drugs, but we started manufacturing drugs. So we were like the cash cow. We were the very center of where the drug was being manufactured at.
And some would think that to be I couldn't fall into that. Like, that's something that I just wouldn't experience. That doesn't sound real. That doesn't sound, that sounds scary. I wouldn't be comfortable there. But quite to the contrary, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I have learned with people that have gotten into drug trafficking and dealing and whatnot is it's a little bit of the opposite picture. Is that so?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as drug trafficking,
Yeah, like the excitement and not the drug buzz, but the buzz that you get, the glamour, the bling bling, the money. I would imagine you weren't driving that, would you say, Taurus around very long. You know,
no,
I mean,
no. At that time, I had an
crazy.
Acura Integra.
Oh, okay.
I'd advanced to an Acura Integra at that point in time.
Right.
No, but
it's
you're
exciting,
right.
isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. So it's not just the drugs that's fueling this power of what I call darkness, but it was the money, it was the women, it was the power that came behind it. Because you got to understand, you're the man. You are the main man. Women want to be with you, and men wanted to be me. So
That's a statement. That's a
yeah.
statement. Women wanted to be with you, and men wanted to be you because you were so hip, cool, active. Everyone's calling you. The glamour of it is really intoxicating, and that's one of the things I really wanted to drive home today.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a celebrity, except for on an addiction platform, and so people would wait. It was almost like they knew our rhythm, because I'd say every 3 to 5 days we were cooking a new batch of methamphetamines. So, you made so much, let's say 20 grams, 30 grams, which is equivalent to about $3,000 every few days. So, I mean, every few days people knew that you had a fresh batch of drugs. And here's the thing about it. We never cut our drugs. We never took some additive to it to make more money, because we had so much product and we had so much money coming in. We didn't have to cut our drugs because we wanted people to come back to our product.
It's a business, right?
It's a business. So
absolute business.
People come to you for your product, right? The supply meets the demand. So if they're going to other drug dealers and they don't have nearly as much good product, and it takes more to get high, and they come to us, it was almost like we had a stamp of approval saying, listen, you come to us, we guarantee you the best drugs.
Right. Yeah, it's a scary reality when you're dealing with something that's obviously so illegal, super dangerous, surveilled, monitored, but yet it's just, I'm trying to say, like, I have come to know it as just a whole different world, and you never rest. I experienced, it's been so many years now that I'm not breaking confidentiality in any way. I'm pretty confident, but part of what my experience led me to learn about actually very early on is, a guy that I was working with that had actually turned on people, which, by the way, is a whole nother thing you just don't do. But
right,
you get into a lot of legal mess with some of this. But dude, he had progressed to where he was the whole East Coast, like picking shipments up in Florida, talking about how you bring them up and distribute in different towns. I mean, this thing can be, the excitement of what we're talking about can be, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, the sort of neighborhood teenager who's making a little bit of bank on some weed, all the way up very, very easily and very, very quickly, to picking shipments up from the cartel. Like, literally, some of what you see on some of those shows is like kind of legit. Is that so?
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, we had some of the best product in the area, correct? So that only connected us with other people who were connected to other drugs like cocaine and things like that. And they loved what we had to offer. So they wanted to partner with us as far as like trading of drugs and different things like that. So I would go to this guy's house, and he had, pounds of cocaine, probably. Right. It'd be in blocks on top of a table on his dining room. It was just nuts. And there was one time where I'm in his house, and there's a knock at the door, and these guys walk in, and that eerie moment you have when you've just stepped into a whole new stage of
another level.
Yeah. Because you could tell when they walked in, they were somebody. You just knew. They carried it, and they had guns with them. It was just, and they were there to pick up cash, and I was, at that point in time, I knew I was probably getting my feet a little too deep in the sand. And I think I'm pretty sure after they left, I was out. I just left. I was like, okay, now we're dealing
Gotta
with
go home and get some pizza.
yeah, we're either dealing with cartel here or some guys that are pretty high in the rankings.
Yeah. You will come across that, and that's and again, you're so at risk. You know, it's such a dangerous intoxication, not with drugs and such, but with the whole culture. And I think, you know, the risk that you're in play just gets, like, you know, tolerated. You know, we talk about drug and addiction, risk tolerance just increases a little bit by a little bit by a little bit, and then you have that moment where you're like, holy cow, is this too much? But did that stop the run? I'm curious for you.
No, actually
Right?
it didn't. No,
Right.
because I had an agenda. I still had a product that I was still selling at large quantities, and it was gone before. But by the time I had it in my hands, I had my own stash for my own addiction, and then I had the stash that I would use for selling drugs.
Neil, let me jump over to you, man. What are you hearing, and what kind of things buzz in your brain, you know, like with what you're hearing with this life kind of being? Like, I'm curious, I'll start you off, maybe, like, any questions that you have, Neil, like, you know, what's the most amount of money that you ever had in your bag or pocket at one time? Do you have any idea?
Well, the one thing that I just thought about is you talked about having your stash set aside. You know, like, did that ever get out of control for you, that you became more of the user than the seller? You know, that's when that I could see that downward spiral as that addiction really takes in. I mean, was that an issue for you, or were you pretty well controlled in what you did versus what you sold?
Absolutely. So there's a saying, they say, never get high on your own product. And that's actually a pretty fair statement. Now, we were producing so much drugs that my addiction could not consume enough of my stash and then into my stash that I would sell. I never had a problem with that. However, I did have a problem with that I was starting to get drugs from other cocaine dealers and things like that, to where I started using that drugs instead of selling that drug. And then now those drug dealers were after me because I owed them $1,000, $500, and things like that. And so I had to move constantly. I had to be on the move always, because now my addiction was taking over.
Oh boy.
I was consuming not just meth, but then I was consuming some marijuana, some cocaine, not so much heroin or nothing like that, but those things. And so I started owing people money, you know, and I could pay them back with my own drugs, but they didn't want that. They wanted their cash flow.
Yeah, that's
So, yeah.
I mean, you know, it's funny. You seem, Aaron, as I get to know you a little bit through Morgan James, you know, awesome businessman with marketing and books, and we're gonna get to a lot of the amazing things that you're doing in prisons and with the youth and stuff. But at that time in your life, you were a horrible businessman, dude.
Terrible.
It is not a good business plan.
No. I had no retirement being built up. That's for sure.
Right. Oh my goodness. So let's wind up a little bit the addiction progression part. Or actually, let me back Neil to you. Actually, I don't want to cut you out. Any other thoughts or things you're hearing?
Not yet.
Okay, let's wrap into a little bit of winding up, like how this progressed for you, and kind of the addiction part, Aaron, of what happened, and how this drug trafficking thing sort of came down, or, you know, changed, and kind of what happened there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with addiction, you start having physical changes, and I lost probably close to 100 pounds at this point in time. There was times where I'd been up for weeks. I think the longest time I've ever been up, which is not, I hadn't slept in, was basically about 2 weeks. And that could play a lot of mind games on you, you know, sleep deprivation and things like that. And I was seeing things. I was hallucinating, but I believe that drugs open a portal to a whole new spiritual world, if you will. And I was seeing shadows and demonic chatter and just evil things. So there was one time.
And what was your drug of choice?
Methamphetamines. It was always
so it was
methamphetamines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, meth will really do some biochemical crazy stuff, man. It's not one to get running on for a long time. For sure. I wanted to share this story real quick. There was a time where we went to this drug house, and my buddy went inside this drug house to sell this household full of people drugs. Well, what happened was, not long after he went into the house, these men came out of the drug house, and they were all like wearing wife beaters, and they all had one thing in common. They were all holding Louisville Slugger bats.
and they surrounded my vehicle. Right?
Oh my.
Yeah. So I'm in this vehicle and I'm going, what in the heck is going on here? And they surrounded my vehicle and like ravaging dogs. You saw the murder in their eyes. I don't even know how to explain it. It was intense.
That is
So
scary.
they surrounded my vehicle. One of the guys came up and started tapping on the window with his bat. And he wanted me to get out of the vehicle. I locked the doors and I cranked my radio up just to kind of like, because I knew that if I got out of that vehicle, I would die.
Oh.
And they started to draw closer and closer and closer to my vehicle. And by the grace of God, at the last second, my buddy comes out the door screaming, he's with me, he's with me. And they thought I was a drug informant. They thought I was a police officer, like an undercover cop.
Right.
Because they were so consumed with the very drug that I was selling them. And so,
oh my gosh,
how crazy is that? That I'm selling these guys the drugs that they've been using, and it's the very drug that was inducing their minds to become paranoid, to where they almost murdered me, like beat me to death with some bats. It was at that point in time I knew that my life was falling apart.
might be a good indicator of like a holy cow moment, as they say in the addictions recovering community, which I don't like this term, by the way. Rock bottom. I don't see it as that, because rock bottom can be any number of things, as simple as something versus something complex. It's more of a spiral down, but
Right.
for lack of a better term, and easy peasy here,
Right.
was that the rock bottom?
Yeah. This was pretty much my rock bottom, if you will.
Yeah.
Where I lost weight. I didn't have a connection with my parents anymore. They knew I was addicted. They knew I was on drugs. I had nobody in my phone that was anywhere close to normal. Everyone was drug addicts and drug dealers and manufacturers. So one night I was in the middle of this house, the drug house I was living in, and the place was empty. And for some reason, everyone was out doing their own thing, right? And there was this moment where I'm standing in the middle of this drug house where I knew like this was it. I was either going to die in this house because I owed a bunch of people a bunch of money, or the police had been chasing us at this point in time, watching us, the DEA. And I either thought I was going to go to jail for a very long time, or I was going to end up in prison for a very long time. And I don't know how to like really put this into words sometimes, but the best way I can describe it is that this weight like came over my shoulders, like a heaviness. And I just remember I fell to the ground, like to my knees in like a surrender position. And I said these words. And you got to understand this. I didn't know God. I mean, I grew up in church when I was younger, but I didn't seek his face, nothing like that. But I was down there in the middle of this drug house. And I cried out to God. And I said, God, if you're real, like if you're really real, I need you to come into my life, and I need you to change it forever. And it would be that one sentence.
Wow.
Like nothing super religious. Didn't have to be in a church, in the middle of a drug house.
That's a powerful, poignant reality.
So 3 days later, I don't know what I was doing. I remember it was 3 days. And I was standing on the front yard at the drug house. I called it the Devil's Den at that time. And the guys that invited me into this house were pointing their finger in my face. And they said, get out of here. You don't belong here anymore. And
Wow.
I'm like, where am I going to go? Like, I'm homeless, They said, it doesn't matter. Get your stuff and get out of here. So I want people to understand that my life was consumed to a trash bag, because I was picking up all my stuff and I put it into this black trash bag. And that's this high and powerful, mighty man who thinks that he's got everything in control and power. And my life was consumed at this point in time to a trash bag.
Yeah.
So I got in my vehicle, and something in that vehicle said, go home, you'll find safety there. And so I drove to my mom's house. I showed up at my mom's front door. She opens the door, and she didn't even recognize her own son. I mean, I was that gone.
Right.
And so I said, Mom, let me in. I want to talk to you. So she invites me in. At this point in time, I've been up for like a week. So I was sick. I mean, I was hallucinating. I was delirious. And I asked my mom if I could move back in. And she said, absolutely not. Look at the condition you're in. Like, look at you. You need rehab. That's what you need. And my dad is in the background. And he's like crying. And this is only the second time I've ever seen my dad cry.
Wow, right.
And he says, well, he's our son. Like, we can't let him go. Look at him. Like, we have to help him. And my mom said, fine. If he gets clean, he can stay here. And so I went through withdrawals and all those things. I made the decision to get clean. And to this day, I've been clean for 20 years.
Wow. Well, congratulations. And that's fantastic to have a 20-year sober date, which is, you know, it's not about 20 years. It's about December the 7th, 2020. But, you know, I was wondering, I think it's December the 6th. Oh, this is December the 5th. Sorry, botched that. But the audience will never know. They'll never know what day we're talking on. I was wondering about that. If we can circle back, Aaron, to family, you know, kind of where your relationship was with them, because we've talked about that on the show, and one of our fellow authors, Linda Hacker, talked about it from a mom's perspective with her son who was addicted to heroin and whatnot. How were they during the progression? You know, 18, 19, 21 years old, did they kind of, it sounds like they had an amazing ability to set limits and be, you know, make that horrible transformation in a parent's eyes of saying, look, I'm helpless. You got to go. You can't do this here, kind of thing. Like what was their angle on stuff prior to that?
Yeah. So like after I started using drugs in high school and stuff like that, I became very defiant towards my parents. My behavior started changing. And so I actually ran away from home a couple of times, and they called the police because they had no idea what else to do. Like I was 16. I was naive. I had no idea how to live on my own. So, I mean, sometimes tough love, you know, sometimes it takes tough love. And so they called the police on me. I went to juvenile detention and things like that. And so after high school, they wanted me to go to college, but I didn't want to go to college. And so I was working some dead-end jobs. So that's when I met that man before I went to the drug house. So me moving out of the house to go live with this guy, they were thinking it as a sign of growing up. They're like, oh, okay, all right. So he's moving on his own. Okay, you know, let's let him walk his own life. Let's let him do his own thing, because they wanted me to go to college, but they didn't push it. It wasn't like a mandatory have to do, you know, they were just encouraging it. So I think at this point in time, they thought me moving out was a sign of independence, to where maybe I was going to grow up a little bit. If I decided to go back to college, you know, I was working, so I wasn't doing anything, you know, bad at that time. But a lot of people ask me, they say, do you think your mom during all this addiction was like a praying mom? And my mom was. She would always pray for me. And because at this point in time, it was out of her hands. There was nothing more she could do. And that's the thing about addiction, is it not only destroys the addict, but it destroys the entire family that comes along with it.
We know this clearly. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's a bombshell. I look at it, Aaron, addiction as a black hole. I've said before many times. It consumes all physical and emotional resources of the individual and all of those individuals around that person that are in any way close. It's just it sucks all life from people around it. It's a black hole. It's terrible. And I think the thing I want to make a point there too, though, is, you know, what's interesting and to hear your story of the progression of things, you know, it you might listen to a story and some components and say, oh my gosh, that's so dramatic. Oh, that's so big. Well, it doesn't start big. I mean, it starts small and it builds and it progresses. So you can't see this. Like that, it struck me when you said your parents are like, oh, okay, well, our kid's moving out. He's, you know, we have to let go and he's leaving the nest. This is a great day. This is beautiful. You know, maybe he'll make his way now. And this is what happens when, you know, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids become 18 years old and you can't see it. You can't see it.
No. And think about this. When I was asking my mom to move back into the house, she said, absolutely not.
Right.
Like, look at the condition you're in. So that is the tough love that sometimes we have to do.
Yes.
You know, I talk to countless parents that message me all the time and say, my son's going through this, my daughter's going through that. And, you know, I try to let them know to love them, but don't enable them. Like, don't give them money. Don't, you know, continuously let them sit in your house and use drugs in their room and stuff like that. Like, that's not that's not beneficial to them.
It is an absolute precarious. Yeah, it's a precarious balance that is terribly difficult to wade through. So here's what I'm going to do. Take a quick break for our sponsor, and then I want to get back and chat about what you're doing now. You know, like the kids in the prison. I mean, it's one of the things I love about this show, man. You know, and talking to so many different people. Like, dude, I am learning like all the time. It's so awesome, and I'm gonna explain what I learned from you from these kids that I think that will shock the audience about love in kids' lives. So just a moment for our sponsor. So we do have a sponsorship with BetterHelp.com. It is an online virtual telephone / video conferencing therapy platform. If you go to throughatherapist's.com, you click the counseling button, and that clicks you through to a survey where you will get the expertise directly designed for you that matches your tendencies, your desires, your preferences, and your issues. They have therapists all across the nation. And I, for one, have become a believer in BetterHelp.com and the services like it, because the pandemic has taught me it is absolutely cool to be able to go through and talk on the phone in a therapy environment. I used to not think that to be the case, guys. I am now utterly convinced, as some of the best therapy sessions I have had to date actually have happened on the phone. So go to throughatherapist's.com, click the counseling tab. It does help to keep the show free for all. We do get a receipt from that when you do that. So help out the show, help out yourself, and dude, reach out as you hear us talking about, you know, addiction and issues with depression and anxiety and all these horrible things. It takes one phone call, one sentence for Aaron to invite God in his life. And in some ways, the action points that follow involve things like BetterHelp.com. And back to the show. All right, man. So listen, you are the same guy, but looking at you, because we have a video platform that we're talking on. Everybody knows Zoom in the pandemic of 2020. How did you get from that to this? Right? What happened? Well, because you got some meat on your bones. You look pretty daggum healthy. Yeah, look at it. How'd you get here, man?
Yeah, man. So that story, you know, the stories that we talk about recently were 20 years ago. So transformation is a process, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. I had to go through anxiety. I went through depression because I had to learn out who Aaron was again. And so my mom comes in one day after I've been working some dead end jobs. I've been sober now, right? So I'm out the withdrawals. I'm no longer living that life. I'm working some dead end jobs. And my mom comes in the room while I'm watching TV. Because see, I'm at a point where I'm like, is this it? Is this life? Like, is this what life is? Like, I'm just going to like sit here and work in some dead end jobs and have no fulfillment in life. And my mom said,
I'm bored. This is not exciting. That no one cares about me. These are the realities, right? That you get sucked into that actually throw people back into the active addictions and whatnot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like the opposite of euphoria, right?
Right. Right. Because you're here, you're way high, and then now you're here, kind of a lot lower. So my mom says, but what do you think about the medical field? Because my mom was in the medical field. She worked for an orthopedic surgeon. I said, we'll try it out. Why not? You know, I'm at that point. I'm just like, whatever. And so I started working at phlebotomy school. Like I was going through tech school and things like that. Well, after tech school, I started working at BioLife Plasma Services, which I don't know if you guys know what BioLife is. It's
like for smart people.
Yeah. It's a plasma center where you come to donate plasma, and they actually pay you to do that.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was there, and I was working as a phlebotomist, sticking people with needles and drawing their plasma, having a good time. And
God.
And I met some nurses there, like some registered nurses, because we had to have nurses to do healthcare screenings and stuff like that for every new donor. And I walked up to them because I was curious. And I said, well, what do you guys do? And they said, well, Aaron, we save lives and we help people. And it was like, I knew that's what I wanted to do. It was like that was that perfect like relationship of knowing and wanting to change my life for other people. Because see, I was a guy that was damaging lives on a daily basis. So I knew to revert that, I wanted to help and save lives on a daily basis.
Wow, very cool.
So that's what I did. So I went to school in 2008. I graduated as my registered nurse. I worked in the ER. I was actually involved in the tornado in Joplin that you guys probably heard about, the Ep5
Yikes, yeah.
tornado that came through there. Yep. I was involved in that. Well, not only that, but then I started to understand that I could manage patient care and help people on more of a personal level. So I went back to school again. And in 2017, which was 3 years ago, I graduated with my master's of science and became a board certified nurse practitioner.
Nice.
And so it's just so cool to show when you go from a drug addict to crying out to God in the middle of a drug house, to changing my life, to really kind of being bored, but now I'm wanting to do something with my life. And now I'm a nurse practitioner.
Neil,
So it just shows you.
do you hear how that works? You know, you're selling drugs, using drugs, and now you have the hope of being able to be in a medical profession, actually prescribing appropriate, shall we say, drugs. How's that for a transformation?
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
You know, I mean, and I think the thing there to realize, and that's part of why we tell our story, right? There's a lot of reasons why we tell our story. You know, last show we just talked about trauma and telling your story and how crucial that is, how important that is. Well, this is a component here where it's hope, right? Like people feel so hopeless, downtrodden. That's fine for Aaron Garcia and all these crazy fancy people that get their shit together, and it ain't me, man. Well, you know what? Like, yeah, it really is. It really, like, the hope that I hope people hear from that is powerful, right? And that's what you do for a lot of young people in the prisons. So,
Absolutely.
Neil, I learned so much by talking to people. Listen to what this cat here has taught me. It was fantastic. And I'm going to let him describe what he found. But he tells me that something like, and I'm going to butcher this, Aaron, but I want to do it because I want to learn it, and you learn it by teaching it, right? 70% of the people that are in prisons are actually from some sort of loveless circumstance, like foster homes or, you know, issues of neglect, which we've talked about on the show, or various types of form where you just don't have the components in your life that hold you up, that support you, that, you know, this is why we live in communities, right? Church communities, or, you know, communities of recovery, 12-step communities. We need to talk more about that, because if you don't have that, boy, you get sucked into the black hole potentially. Is that so, Aaron? How did I deal with that? How did I do with that? What have you seen?
No, that's great. So we've talked about this over the phone prior to the interview, but you know, I was doing some research and I was starting to understand, because our prison system is just continuing to grow. And I was like, what's going on with all that? Well, I came across a statistic that said that 70% of prisoners have at one point in time either in the foster system or came from like you said, a neglected home, an abusive home, and things like that. So what happens is that they don't feel love and they start spiraling out of control, starting to use drugs or chase women or do something to make themselves loved or satisfied. And that just leads to more criminal action and things like that. And next thing you know, they're stuck in a cell and wondering how I got here.
Because you know what? It occurs to me. I mean, you pull together the way we describe drug trafficking and combat, like, I don't feel loved or I really don't have these relationships. Boy, I reach out with something that somebody thinks all the girls want to be around me and all the guys want to be me. I mean, that's a hell of an attractive get for a person, isn't it? It occurs to me.
Yeah, but and I'll be honest with you, it yet brought temporary satisfaction. It wasn't fulfilling.
Right.
See, that's the thing, is we're always chasing something to satisfy us, and then we do it and then we're like, and it's over and we just want to move on. But I started understanding that since I had been in addiction, I knew that I could go back into these prisons and these juvenile detentions and help people, share my story, give them some encouragement and things like that. So in 2015, the Lord, when I started developing this relationship with God and I was seeking his face, he told me one day, he said, I need you to write a book about your life. And I'm like, okay, hold on. You got the wrong guy, God. I mean, I got a C in English, barely graduated high school. You got the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Like, choose somebody else. So for like 3 months, man, I was this ridiculous, like knock at the door. Hey, I need you to write this book, and I'll take it places it's never been before. So my wife, after church one day, tells me she's extremely tired, and she goes to lay down on the couch. Well, my laptop was on the counter over by the kitchen on the bar, and it was opened up.
Okay.
And he said, now. And I walked over to the laptop and literally almost typed out the first half of the book. And it just rolled. I mean, just like it was a part of me. And
Wow.
I told my story. And that's all I did with inspiration. So the book was self-published. I self-published my first book. I had an editor come towards me. I had a book cover design person come towards me. I had all the things that I needed. And I didn't reach out to these people, but someone heard I was writing a book. So next thing you know, things started falling into place. So I wrote my book in 2015. It went on to become a bestseller on Amazon in both inspiration and spirituality. And I started to understand that this book was impacting people's lives. So one of my buddies calls me up one day and says, hey, I feel like I'm called to the prison system. And I said, well, if you are, I want to get involved in it. I have books that I want to get into the prison system. So we put something on Facebook on trying to get donations for the books to get them into prisons. And so we can get them at a cheap cost because I'm the author and I get it pretty much at print cost off Amazon. So our first week that we asked for money, we were able to purchase like 200 books right out the gate. I mean, money started coming in. So we started getting these books into city jails and juvenile detentions. And then it started going from there, and it started going into county jails and then into prisons. And we started getting word back that this book was doing a mighty thing in these prisons. And men were passing them from one man to another. And what I hear a lot of is this: your story is my story. And it transforms their mind to let them understand that, hey, if this guy was really gone and he was saved, then my life is not a throwaway. Like I can do this. I can come up out of this addiction, because most of the time people are in prison because of addiction that influence some sort of criminal action.
Right.
So if this guy changed his life, I can change mine. So it's really powerful.
Absolutely the truth. And when you speak the truth in a genuine and caring and passionate way, people listen and can hear. Yeah, Aaron, I am so appreciative of what you're doing and how that's going, because the despair and the darkness that people get into seems all consuming, and the truth of it is sometimes they don't make it out, and that just makes my heart bleed, knowing that reality, because you can get out. That's what the battle, the battle within is about, seeing that you can be out and free.
Right.
So
absolutely. So it's a change of perspective, right? So it's like, I lived this life. This is the only life I know. Something comes along and stops you in your tracks is almost like a turning point. And then, like my book, for instance, is possibly a turning point for their lives. And they start to understand and have clarity going, wait a second, my life doesn't have to be this. Like, I can change my life. I just have to renew my mind and think differently. And so we have had countless people. We have a P.O. box, send us letters after letter after letter of how much these books are transforming their lives. So I have the opportunity to go into the juvenile detention center every once in a while and share, and not only share my story, but talk to like young men who the story has impacted their life. And I get to sit down with them and just encourage them. And I was telling you a story about that young man. Do you remember we talked about this?
No, I do not.
This young boy grew up in a home of addiction. And his mom made her young boy, after his dad shot up heroin, and he had to his job was to open the eyes of his dad.
Oh yeah.
To make sure that he wasn't dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
that
right there.
Yeah. Right. Like, that's an experience that nobody should have.
There's no hope for that. That kid is destined to go down the path of imprisonment and things like that. However, when he read my book, he started to understand that his life was not a coincidence, and that though he wasn't loved when he was a young boy, that he is now loved by the Father, and that my book would share my story and give him inspiration to want to change his life. And even though his parents are still addicts, not to follow their ways, but to follow a new way to where he can live a life that impacts people and lives a life of fulfillment.
I think that we talk about it in way of a book, and I think that's such a simplistic thought process or reality as opposed to what the real reality is. A book is a platform. A book is a vessel. It's really the connections, right? It's the reaching out. It's the not being alone, realizing that I ain't alone. I read this guy's story. I hear this guy's story, and his story is mine. I am him. I am actually capable of being a part of the world in a real way, in a community. So it's really the connections, the emotion that goes through the book, the passion that goes through the book, the connection that goes through a book into the jail systems and into people's hearts. Do you find that? Because I think connection is a huge part of recovery. You don't recover very well alone at all. I think I'll make that statement.
Yeah. It's kind of like discipleship, if you will. Discipleship is bringing someone alongside you, like sharing life together and teaching how you live your life by example. And so, like, when we make these connections, we try to write every prisoner back and tell them how much we were encouraged by because they'll usually share their story.
Right.
And so we just encourage them by writing them back and telling them to keep going, and to give them any kind of insight that we have on what they can do in a certain situation. I mean, it's just really beautiful. You got to make those connections. You got to have those relationships, because though people read a really inspiring story, they still fall back into the same environments.
Right.
So bad company corrupts good behavior. Just remember that.
Bad company corrupts good behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And you see that in relapse and in falling back into, selling, and, 2 years later you need money and the car broke down, and, I know I can always go get that bling bling again, all sorts of things. And the company, choose your friends wisely is another phrase, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, drugs is an easy way to make money, and so they'll understand that after out of the prison system, it's hard to find a job. So what are they going to do? Well, there's nothing else to do besides criminal action again. That's the fastest way to get drugs,
right?
And so then they fall back into the money. I'm sorry, and that's how they fall back into the prison system again. That's why there's reoccurring offenders and stuff like that.
Chronic. Yeah, absolutely. We need to taxi in. We're fine on time, but I just want to warn us to funnel our brains in, to taxi in a little bit here. Neil, let me kick over to you. I mean, it's a hell of a story, right? I mean, we check in again with what you're hearing and what you're thinking. You've listened to our shows now about addiction and all. Is there things you're thinking about that, that you have an opportunity to ask Aaron, or what's your brain doing?
The one thing I kind of wanted to ask when you're talking about your parents and stuff is, being in the state that you were in and everything you were going through, do you think there was anything your parents could have done to change you?
I would say no. And the reason for that is because as teenagers or even as young adults, we make our own decisions in life. And though we can have great parents, because see, that's the thing, is my story is different than a lot of people's story because they grew up in a bad home. Well, I grew up in a good home. But see, I chose to follow the world, and I wanted to become popular. And if addiction was it, or if alcohol was it, or if the bar scene was it, like, I wanted to get into all that. And so that drove me down a different path. So is there anything my parents could have done as far as manipulation to try and keep me where I'm at and walk the right road? Absolutely not. But they did, when I was a teenager, help me pick the right friends. Like, they didn't want me to go and hang out with these friends or those friends. So they try to keep my friends close, to understand who was potentially a good friend, a good role model, and not the ones that were going through addiction. So,
Neil, I think I would add there, it's a good question. And I think that parents feel a lot of helplessness, in that process, because there is helplessness. I mean, you can't control any other person. However, there are things that you can do. Linda Hacker talked amazingly about it in her book, The Light as a Feather, and others that have been in my office, and we've worked on that issue. One of the things that occurs to me, Neil, when you ask that, is what we talked about the very last show. When your spouse or your loved one has trauma, right? You ever presently stay present in a loving way, right? The consistency. That doesn't mean they live with you. That doesn't mean you enable, to use that word. That doesn't mean that you just have no boundaries or say no or limits. But that means you love, and you remain that constant, in a person's life. And it occurred to me as we were talking, last show, to Leslie, right? Who by the way is ever more powerfully, consistently present in our lives than God himself, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. No human being is really good at doing that. We try. So parents out there, be prayerful, be consistent, be loving, in a consistent and long-term perspective way. I don't know. There's a lot there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's taxi in with a couple of sort of oblique issues and questions I'm curious about, Aaron. I wanted to ask you about legalization. We've got this little debate, and prisons are, particularly not so much with alcohol and other things, but particularly with trafficking and whatnot. The prison system's front and center here, and there are some that talk about legalization. It's a current event issue. I mean, I guess over there in Oregon, or in your neck of the woods, kind of close to y'all,
Mm-hmm.
like they're just saying, go ahead, walk down the street with acid in your pocket. Like we're decriminalizing this to enable people to be able to access treatment and get well better, is some of the thinking. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. I'm curious how you see that, and if you thought much about it.
Well, as a medical professional and living in Missouri, we just passed, I don't know if you heard this, a legalization of marijuana.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff's raging through our country. Yeah.
Yeah. So people ask me the question is this right? Is this wrong? I've read articles coming out of Colorado and things like that unemployment is at an all-time high, that homelessness is at an all-time high. And so you got to understand this is, I get it. There are some people who are in pain. There are some people may have seizures or, anxiety and things like that. But coming from a gentleman who's been down the addiction path, marijuana was kind of a gateway drug for me. It really was. It was kind of like exposing me to a whole new area. I don't see a lot of good coming out of it, to be honest with you. I just don't. I don't think people get marijuana to just get relief. I think people use marijuana to get high and to feel good and to be, all these things. Another thing I joke about, but I don't say someone smokes marijuana all day long, goes out and gets a diploma. I'm not gonna,
oh boy, it's kind of true.
Yeah, I'm not going to smoke weed and write a book, and go out and be prosperous and stuff like that. So, we have to ask ourselves the question is, why marijuana and what's the motive behind it? Because I think a lot of people just want the marijuana to be legalized so they can smoke and have the freedom to do so without having to worry about looking over their shoulder. But I think the long-term effects of it are not good. And I think Colorado and places like that who are throwing out these articles are saying so, but we're kind of in that state of we're so far into it. How do you reverse it,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least to follow that a little bit and see what happens in the treatment communities and the recovering communities and whatnot. I wanted to ask you because I know you're working a lot in the prisons and jails and stuff, and I thought that'd be an interesting thing to tap your brain on because that is a real time developing reality.
Yeah,
the whole decriminalization factors.
Right, and here's the deal with marijuana: it's a controlled one substance, which means that the FDA will not test it to see how well it works. So it'll never be, at this point in time, FDA approved. So all the medication that I prescribe is FDA approved. Right. So it's been ran through the ringer.
CBD may be, I mean, it's something that, there's a lot of chatter about, but we'll see. Let me jump to another one as well before we run out of time. I am curious as well about another current topic that we deal with a lot, which is border control. Now, with trafficking specifically, border control is a big issue, and don't get me wrong. Well, I won't tip my hand. Well, how do you see border control as a factor in trafficking and whatnot?
Well, I think if you have an open border, you have a lot. So I hate to say it like this, but manufacturing and trafficking are probably always going to be there.
Right.
It's almost impossible to stop it. It's a hidden agenda, right? It's like you said, the cars that you're driving by, the trucks that have these pounds of marijuana in, or cocaine, or what have you. The cartel, the big wigs. I mean, they're influenced by money, right? And so they're always wanting to move traffic into the United States to make more money. Opening borders will probably give a lot more leniency to allowing them to traffic drugs from either Mexico or whatever into the United States. So it's a topic I haven't really given a whole lot of thought to it yet, but it is definitely would cause leniency to allow them to probably have more efficient trafficking to get that into the United States. So
here's my problem and my thought I'd offer for you to chew on. Why is drug trafficking such a big deal? Because there's a lot of money in it. Why is there a lot of money in it? Because there's a lot of people that want it, right?
The supply meets the demand.
Right? It's a business, and that demand is so strong because addiction is so strong. Let's deal with it there, and get the dollars on treatment and our focus on wellness and get to people's hearts. If we have 70% of those people that don't have loving environments into the home and into their lives, boy, that might be pretty effective to start, somewhere with those thoughts, right?
Yeah. So go to the actual nucleus of where the issue is. Take care of the addicts, get rid of the addicts, and then the supply, you won't need it.
Absolutely.
Have the supply.
I think there's some things to think about there and go on. So listen, anything that you want to kind of sum us up with, Aaron? Let's get out of here. Thoughts that you forgot or missed, or anything else in kind of summary? Any messages?
Yeah, I really want to point people to the website, honestly, because my first book, my testimony to help people with addiction is on there. So when they subscribe to my email list, they actually get my first book absolutely free, because I'm really wanting to spread that out to more of a bigger sphere of influence. So
coincidence or God, a testimony illustrating there is a living God. Yeah.
Yeah. And run them through my addiction, my issues with my family, all those things. And then the beautiful resurrection, if you will, of my life. And
therapisteyes.com, get that there as well. It's easy to find. Neil, you'll have that up and running, right?
Yep. We'll be linking straight to his website.
So it'll be on there. Yeah, I just appreciate the courage that you're showing, Aaron. I'm going to do a high five with you across the United States here in a second. We're going to give a hand clap that designates that, because, I always, highlight how courageous it is and how important it is to share your story. And I just appreciate, you do that over and over again. You get weller every single time you do it. Let me say that again. When you share your story, you get weller more and more every single time that you do it. So people out there are listening with a lack of hope, and they hear your story and the thoughts that you have about recovery. And I think what showed through today loud and clear is the hope that we have in being able to kind of deal with these types of things. So we're going to hand clap as a high five, and I'm going to count us down. 3, 2, 1. All right. That's awesome, man. I appreciate it. Neil, why don't you take us out of here, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. Neil, take us out.
All right. Well, this is Through a Therapist Eyes. It was a great conversation with Aaron. And if you need help or anything, reach out to someone. BetterHelp, your local therapist, a friend, anything, pastor, minister. People are there to help you. Just do what you can, talk, share, and just be open and be honest, because people are there to help you.
All right, guys. We will see you all next week. Have an awesome holiday season as best you can. Take care.